The fire is dying down, and the woods have gone completely quiet. It's the kind of dead silence that's way more terrifying than any noise. That's when you see him again, right at the edge of the trees. Just the silhouette of a man with a thick beard, staring at your tent. He doesn't move. He doesn't make a sound. He just watches. That's a little taste of the kind of terror we're getting into tonight. We have 4 chilling stories, all said to be based on true encounters, that start as fun camping trips and turn into total nightmares. These are the kinds of tales that get passed around a campfire, accounts of seeing something that just can't be explained, something watching from just beyond the firelight. So you might want to turn down the lights as we explore what's really lurking in the deep woods. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. Our first story tonight is from a man named Leo. He thought a weekend away with his friends would be the perfect escape. He found out that sometimes, you're never really alone. The plan was simple, a classic, really. Me, Mark, and Chris, just getting away from the city for a long weekend. We'd been talking about this trip for months, a real escape into the deep woods of the Pacific Northwest. We weren't exactly survival experts, just 3 friends who loved the smell of pine and the crackle of a campfire. We found a spot deep inside a national forest, miles down a dirt road our GPS was barely hanging on to. It felt perfect. A little clearing by a stream, walled in by ancient fir and cedar trees that looked like they touched the sky. The first day was everything we'd hoped for. We set up the tents, gathered firewood, and spent the afternoon fishing. As dusk settled in, painting the sky orange and purple, we got a good fire going. We were cooking sausages on sticks and telling dumb stories from college, feeling that old easy friendship settle back in. The woods around us were buzzing with the normal sounds of the night. Crickets, a distant owl, the rustle of leaves. It was peaceful. It felt totally safe. It was around 10 o'clock when I first saw him. I'd gotten up to walk to the edge of the clearing to stretch my legs and look at the stars. Mark and Chris were laughing by the fire behind me. I was just standing there, soaking it all in, when a little flicker of movement caught my eye. I squinted into the dark, just past the glow of the fire. Standing just inside the tree line, partly hidden by a low-hanging branch, was a man. He was perfectly still. Even from about 50 yards away, I could make out a few details in the moonlight. He was tall, broad, and had a long, thick beard that covered most of his chest. And he was just staring. Not at the camp, but right at me. A cold prickle of fear ran down my spine. It was weird, but I tried to talk myself out of it. Maybe he was another camper who got lost. "Hey, you all right over there?" I called out, my voice sounding way too loud. The man didn't answer, didn't move a muscle. He just kept staring, like a statue at the edge of the woods. The intensity of his gaze felt real, like a physical weight. "Leo? Who are you talking to?" Mark yelled from the fire. I turned my head for a second. "There's a guy over here, by the trees." When I looked back, he was gone. And I don't mean he walked away. I mean he vanished. 1 second, he was a solid, dark shape, and the next, there was nothing. No sound of footsteps, no snapping twigs. Just gone. I just stood there, my heart pounding. "He's gone," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Chris laughed. "Probably a shadow, man. The fire's playing tricks on your eyes." I wanted to believe him. But what I saw felt so real. I went back to the fire, trying to shake the feeling. We stayed up for another hour, but for me, the mood was ruined. Every snap of a twig made me jump. I kept glancing back toward the tree line, half expecting to see him standing there again. The next day, we went on a long hike up a nearby ridge. The workout and the incredible views helped push the weirdness to the back of my mind. By the time we got back to camp, tired and hungry, I'd almost convinced myself Chris was right. It was a trick of the light. The guys were even joking about it, calling him the bearded ghost of the woods, and speculating that it could have been Bigfoot. The laughter made it feel less real. That night, things got much worse. We were all in our separate tents. The wind had picked up, making the tent fabric rustle and flap. I was just drifting off to sleep when I heard it. A heavy footstep, right outside my tent. Slow, deliberate. Crunch. A pause. Then another. Crunch. My eyes snapped open. I held my breath, listening. That wasn't an animal. Animal steps are quicker, lighter. This was heavy, two-legged, and walking with purpose. The footsteps circled my tent once, slowly, before stopping right next to my head, with only a thin layer of nylon between us. I could hear breathing. Deep, raspy breaths, like someone had just run a race. My whole body went stiff with fear. I was too scared to move, too scared to even make a sound. I thought about yelling for Mark or Chris, but my throat was closed up with panic. The breathing went on for what felt like forever, a low, rough sound that seemed to vibrate through the ground. I squeezed my eyes shut, just praying for it to go away. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. A heavy silence fell over the campsite. After a few agonizing minutes, I slowly unzipped my sleeping bag and crawled to the tent flap. My hand was shaking so bad I could barely grab the zipper. I peeked outside. The moon was bright, lighting up the clearing. The campsite was empty. Mark and Chris's tents were still. The fire was just glowing embers. There was nothing there. I scanned the tree line, my heart pounding, expecting to see the bearded man. But there was nothing. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I told them what happened. They were more concerned this time. The joke stopped. Chris, always the skeptic, suggested it could have been a bear, but I knew it wasn't. A bear doesn't breathe like that. It doesn't walk with that kind of deliberate human rhythm. We decided to pack up and leave a day early. The perfect campsite now felt threatening. As we were breaking down the tents, Mark called me over. "Leo, come look at this." He was pointing at the ground where my tent had been. In the soft dirt were two huge footprints. They were shaped like a human foot, but they were enormous, at least 18 inches long and incredibly wide, pressed deep into the earth. There were no claw marks. We all just stood there, staring at the prints. The bearded ghost didn't seem funny anymore. We threw our gear into the truck, not even bothering to pack it right. We just wanted out. As we drove away, I looked back at the clearing one last time, and my blood ran cold. Standing in the exact same spot as the first night was the bearded man. He was watching us leave. In the clear light of day, I could see him plainly. He was huge, easily over 7 feet tall, and covered in what looked like matted dark hair, not clothes. His face was hard and weathered. His eyes seemed to hold a strange, ancient intelligence. He didn't look angry. He just looked curious. He slowly raised a hand, not a wave, but like he was acknowledging us. Then he turned and simply melted back into the forest. We never went back to that part of the woods. I still have no idea what we saw. A hermit? A guy in a suit? Or was it something else? Something that's lived in those woods for centuries watching us come and go. All I know is that the image of that face is burned into my memory. Sometimes, late at night, I can still feel him watching. Next, we have a story from a woman named Chloe, a seasonal park ranger. She's used to the sounds of the wilderness, but one night, she heard something that wasn't on any animal chart, something that knew her name. I've been a park ranger in the Appalachians for 5 seasons. I love the solitude and the rugged beauty of the mountains. I've seen bears, weathered crazy storms, and helped plenty of lost hikers. I really thought I was prepared for anything the woods could throw at me. I was wrong. This happened last fall. The park was busy, but my patrol area was a remote backcountry section that didn't see many people. I was on a 3-day solo patrol, checking on the trails. My first night was quiet and uneventful. It was on the second day that things got weird. I was hiking a trail through a deep, shaded hollow called Whisper Gap. The name fits. The wind funnels through the trees and creates a constant murmur, like hushed voices. It's usually a comforting sound. That day, it felt different. The air was heavy and still. The whispers were gone. The silence was total, and it was unnerving. As I walked, I got that distinct feeling of being watched. It's a cliché, I know, but it's a primal instinct you learn to trust out here. I kept looking over my shoulder, scanning the woods. I didn't see anything, but the feeling wouldn't go away. I told myself it was just paranoia and picked up my pace, wanting to get to my campsite before dark. That's when I heard it. Chloe. The voice was faint, barely there. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. I stopped dead, my heart jumping into my throat. I pulled out my radio. "This is Ranger Thompson. Is anyone on this channel?" I asked, my voice shaking a little. Just static. I told myself I was imagining it. Just the wind. I kept walking, faster this time. "Chloe. Wait." This time it was clearer, closer. It was a woman's voice, soft and pleading. It sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. A cold dread seeped into my bones. Nobody should be out here. "Who's there?" I shouted. "Identify yourself." The only reply was the rustling of leaves. I stood there for a full minute, listening, my hand hovering over my bear spray. Nothing. I was seriously starting to question my sanity. I made it to my campsite just as the sun was setting. I set up my tent with fumbling, hurried movements, my eyes constantly darting towards the dark woods. I built a huge fire, needing the light as a shield. As I sat there trying to eat, the voice came again. "Chloe, I'm so cold." It was right behind me. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the dark. Nothing. Just a wall of trees. The voice was so clear. It was as if someone had whispered right in my ear. And it sounded exactly like my sister, Sarah. My blood ran cold. Sarah lived 3 states away. It was impossible. Then my radio crackled to life. "Chloe, help me." It was Sarah's voice again, distorted by static, filled with pain and fear. Raw panic seized me. Was she in trouble? Had something happened? "Sarah, is that you? What's wrong?" I yelled into the radio. The only response was a long burst of static that ended in a sound that was not human. It was a high-pitched guttural shriek, like an animal in agony, but with a horrifying, mocking laugh mixed in. That's when I knew. Whatever was out there, it wasn't my sister. It was toying with me. I threw my food in the fire and kicked dirt over the flames. I wasn't staying there. I didn't care that it was pitch black. I just had to get away. I ran. I ran blindly down the trail, my headlamp beam bouncing everywhere, creating dancing, monstrous shadows. Behind me, I could hear it following, crashing through the underbrush, and it kept calling my name. "Chloe, don't run from me." It used Sarah's voice again. Then it changed. It started using my mother's voice, my father's, my best friend's. Each one was a perfect imitation. It begged me to come back, told me I was going the wrong way. It was psychological torture, way more terrifying than any physical threat. It was trying to break me, to confuse me, to lure me off the path and deeper into the woods. I sobbed as I ran, my lungs burning. The voices were a nightmare chorus in my head. I don't know how long I ran. Hours, maybe. The trail eventually opened up onto a service road. I stumbled onto the gravel and my legs just gave out. I lay there, gasping for air, listening. The sounds of pursuit had stopped. The woods were silent again. I stayed on that road until dawn, too afraid to move. When the first light hit the sky, I got up and walked the 5 miles back to my truck. I didn't look back. I filed a report, of course. I left out the voices. I just said I was stalked by a large, unidentified animal. They sent a team to investigate. They found tracks, but they couldn't identify them. They were large, sort of like a canine's, but with an unnaturally long stride. In some places, it looked like it had been walking on 2 legs. I learned later from an old-timer in town about the local legends of spirits that haunt the deep woods. Creatures that can mimic human voices to lure their prey into the darkness. They said these things are born from desperate hunger, and they can drive a person mad. I took a desk job with the Park Service after that. I couldn't go back out there alone. I still love the mountains, but I look at them differently now, with a kind of fear. Because I know there are things in the deep, quiet places of the world that are ancient, predatory, and they know our names. This next story takes us to the Great Smoky Mountains, to a place where the past isn't just a memory. It's a lingering, watchful presence. It was sent in by a man named Mark, who went camping with his wife, Jessica, in what they thought was just a quaint, historic site. They were looking for history. They found something else waiting for them in the abandoned town of Elkmont. My wife, Jessica, is a huge history buff. So when she suggested we go camping in the Great Smoky Mountains and visit the Elkmont ghost town, I was all for it. We'd seen pictures of the old, abandoned cottages being swallowed by the forest. The idea of exploring a place like that was exciting. We booked a site at the Elkmont campground, right next to the historic district, for a weekend in late October. The drive up was beautiful. We set up our tent and immediately went to explore. The ghost town was fascinating and incredibly eerie. Walking among the ruined cabins, you could almost hear echoes of the past. But there was also a real sense of sadness, of abandonment. As the afternoon wore on, the air got colder. We realized we were the only ones walking around. A deep chill settled over the area, a cold that felt like it went deeper than just the autumn air. Jessica, who's usually very down-to-earth, clutched my arm. "This place feels heavy," she whispered. I had to agree. The feeling of being watched was intense. We headed back to our campsite as dusk fell. The campground was pretty busy, and the sight of other tents and campfires was a relief. A little ways down from us, another tent was set up. A simple dome tent, like ours. We hadn't seen anyone over there, but figured they were out hiking. That night, the strangeness started. We were sitting by our fire when I heard a noise from the woods behind us. A faint scraping sound. I shone my flashlight into the trees, but saw nothing. A few minutes later, we heard it again, closer. It was a rhythm. Scrape, drag, scrape, drag. "What is that?" Jessica asked, her voice tight. "Probably a raccoon," I said, trying to sound confident, but the sound was too heavy for a raccoon. We tried to ignore it, but the sound kept circling our campsite from just inside the darkness. The rhythmic scraping was broken up by a soft, wet cough. It was deeply unsettling. Finally, after about 20 minutes, the sounds faded away. Later, as we were getting into the tent for the night, I glanced over at the neighboring campsite. There was a soft light on inside their tent. Someone was home. It made me feel a little better. I was woken up around 2 a.m. by a sound that made my blood run cold. It was the sound of breathing, deep and raspy, right outside our tent. It wasn't an animal. It was guttural, labored, and wet, and it was moving. I lay perfectly still, listening as the breathing sound slowly moved around our tent. Then, I saw it. A shadow fell across the tent wall, silhouetted against the moonlight. It was the shape of a person, tall and unnaturally thin. But it wasn't moving like a person. The shadow dropped down, and for a terrifying second it looked like it was crawling on all fours, its limbs moving in a jerky, insect-like way. Then it would stand up again, swaying, before dropping down once more. It moved with a broken rhythm, totally silent except for that horrifying, wet breathing. Jessica was awake too, her hand gripping my arm. We were both paralyzed with fear. The shadow figure continued its grotesque patrol around our tent. At one point, it stopped, and the silhouette of a long, thin hand pressed against the tent wall, just inches from my face. I could see the outline of long, spindly fingers. I think I stopped breathing. I was sure it was going to rip through the fabric. But after a long moment, the hand pulled back. The shadow moved away, and the sound of its breathing slowly faded. We didn't sleep. We just huddled together in our sleeping bags until the first hint of dawn. As soon as it was light enough to see, we scrambled out of the tent. I looked at the ground, searching for footprints. There was nothing. The ground was covered in damp leaves, but there were no tracks, no sign anything had been there at all. Shaken, we started packing up as fast as we could. Our weekend trip was over. As I was taking down our tent, I looked over at the neighboring campsite. The tent was still there, but it was too quiet. No sign of movement. A terrible feeling crept over me. I walked over, calling out, "Hello? Anybody there?" No response. The tent flap was slightly unzipped. Against my better judgment, I peered inside. It was empty. Not just empty of people, completely empty. No sleeping bags, no gear, just a bare tent floor. It looked like it had never been used. The true horror of it hit me. I backed away, my mind reeling. I knew I had seen a light in that tent. We both did. Where were the people? We finished packing in a panic and practically ran to our car. As we drove out, we flagged down a ranger and told him everything. The shadow, the breathing, the empty tent. He listened patiently, a weary look on his face. He told us that strange things are often reported in Elkmont. People hear things, see things. He said the area is steeped in a history of hardship and tragedy, and sometimes that history doesn't stay in the past. He went to check on the campsite we pointed out. He called us later that day. He said there was no record of anyone being registered for that site, and when he went to inspect it, the tent was gone. There was no sign anyone had ever camped there at all. It had simply vanished. We still talk about that night. We have no explanation. Was the shadow a ghost from Elkmont's tragic past? And what about the tent? Was it part of the apparition? Or were its owners real, and they just weren't as lucky as we were? We'll never know. But we know one thing for sure. Some ghost towns aren't just empty buildings. They're waiting. Our final story tonight is a deeply unsettling account from a solo hiker named Ben. An experience in the high country of Colorado taught him that the feeling of being watched can sometimes mean you are being herded. I've been a solo backpacker for over a decade. The appeal for me is the challenge and the profound silence of being truly alone in nature. I've hiked all over the country and have always felt at home in the wilderness. An experience I had 2 years ago in the San Juan Mountains of Colorado changed all that. I was on a 5-day high-altitude trek. The first 2 days were incredible. Breathtaking scenery. No other people. Exactly the solitude I was looking for. On the third afternoon, things started to feel off. I was crossing a vast, open tundra above the tree line when I noticed something strange. On a large boulder 100 yards off the trail, a symbol was carved into the rock. It was a spiral with a jagged line cutting through it. It looked fresh. I found it odd, but I kept going. A mile or so later, I saw another one, this time scratched into the dirt of the trail itself. The same spiral, the same jagged line. A knot of unease began to form in my stomach. This wasn't a coincidence. It felt like a marker. But for what? As the day went on, I saw more of them, carved into a tree, arranged out of small stones. It was like someone was walking just ahead of me, leaving this bizarre trail. The feeling of solitude was replaced by the unnerving sensation of being followed. That evening, I made camp by an alpine lake. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. As I was making dinner, I scanned the surrounding ridges, and then I saw a flicker of movement. I grabbed my binoculars. There was a man standing there. He was too far away to see clearly, but he was tall and thin, wearing dark clothing. He was standing perfectly still, watching my camp. A silent sentinel. I lowered my binoculars, my heart hammering. When I looked again, he was gone. Sleep didn't come easy. I lay in my tent, clutching my trekking pole, listening to the wind. Several times I thought I heard rocks clattering, like footsteps on the slope above me. But whenever I looked, there was nothing. The next morning, I woke up exhausted and paranoid. As I was taking down my tent, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. About 30 feet away, a small pile of stones had been built, and on the top stone, scratched into its surface, was the spiral symbol. He had been here. While I was sleeping, he had come down from the ridge, walked right into my camp, and left his mark. I wasn't just being followed. I was being monitored, toyed with. Panic started to set in. I abandoned my planned route. My only goal was to get back to my car, a full day's hike away. But a thick fog rolled in, and the trail became hard to follow. It felt like the mountain itself was trying to trap me. Twice, I found the trail deliberately blocked. Logs dragged across it, piles of rocks arranged to guide me onto a false path that led to a cliff. It was intelligent. I wasn't just lost. I was being herded. The symbol was everywhere now, a constant mocking reminder that I was not alone and not in control. Late in the afternoon, exhausted and demoralized, I stumbled into a small clearing, and I saw it. Tucked against a rock outcropping was a primitive shelter made of branches and animal hides. A small fire pit in front of it held glowing embers. Someone had been here just minutes ago. The air was thick with the smell of wood smoke and something else, something musky and wild. I stood frozen, scanning the trees. He was here. He was close. I could feel his presence, a heavy, oppressive weight in the air. I didn't wait to find out who it belonged to. I turned and ran. I didn't care about the trail. I just scrambled downhill, crashing through bushes, driven by pure, primal fear. I heard nothing behind me, but the silence was more terrifying than any sound. I finally burst out of the woods onto the road where my car was parked as the last light of day was fading. I have never been so relieved to see my car. I sped away, not looking back. I can't explain what happened up there. The man, the symbols, the blocked trails. He was the master of that domain, and I was just a mouse in his maze. Was he a man who had left society behind and become something wild? Or was he something that had always been there, a silent shepherd of the high peaks? I haven't been solo backpacking since. That feeling of being herded, of being an insignificant plaything for some silent intelligence in the mountains, broke something in me. I learned that the wilderness doesn't just contain beauty, it contains secrets. And some of those secrets are watching you. The forest holds a mirror to our deepest fears. The fear of being lost, of being watched, of what lies just beyond the light of our fire. These stories remind us that the woods are deep, dark, and full of secrets. When we step into them, we enter a world that is not our own. And sometimes, its inhabitants make that terrifyingly clear. Thank you for listening. If you have your own theory about what these people saw, let me know in the comments. Until next time, stay safe, and maybe think twice before heading into the woods alone.